2022. A lot has been happening over the past few years in the education sector. More recently, the strike actions have been front and center in the news, and with the pending reopening of schools, all eyes are on the relevant parties to make sure that they do come to a resolution sooner rather than later. Tonight, our focus is on all things education, and we are honored to have with us in the studio the Minister of Education, and will broadly discuss Ghana's education sector. We encourage you to join in the discussion during the show by sending your messages to our WhatsApp number 055-744-6429. And as I mentioned, our guest tonight is the Minister of Education, Honorable Dr. Yaw Osei Educhum. Minister, a warm welcome back to Talking Point.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good.
Great news in the education sector.
Great news.
STEM, our schools in Accra, 10 schools across the country to be opened. So there's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about. Okay, let's start with, so the first term of the MPP government, you were deputy minister.
Yes.
Now in the second term, you are the substantive minister.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, how different has your approach been now that you now manage the whole gamut of education? And the secondary part of that is, when you were deputy minister, some of the plans that you have to innovate the education sector, how have they dovetailed into this new role that you're taking?
Thank you so much, and a very good evening to your listening audience and viewers. Fortunately for me, I'm with the same government. And therefore, I'm continuing the implementation of the Kufuor vision for education transformation in Ghana. So not much has changed in terms of my role as a deputy minister and minister, except for the fact that now, at my level, the buck stops with me.
Yes.
So the good and the bad and the ugly and the in-between stops with me, and that's the difference. But other than that, we are pursuing the same agenda. Agenda that the president set for himself during his first term is what we are continuing. So the reforms are continuing, the transformation is continuing. New schools are being built in alignment with his vision. So in terms of my role as a deputy minister and minister, of course, in terms of responsibility. But other than that, it is the same Kufuor vision of education transformation that positions the nation's education system to play its rightful role in the socio-economic transformation of the country.
Okay, so you've used the word transformation a lot, so I want to hone in on that and talk about the STEM education. So last week, I think the president cut sword on a STEM school. Could you talk to us a little bit about that and what plans are in place to replicate that across the nation?
Thank you so much. A friend of mine in the U.S. said something. He said, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So once you look at challenges of education system, you also have to quickly innovate and transform. So when you look at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, it is a response to the fourth industrial revolution. Things are changing around us. Many, many years ago, we had a steam engine, the first industrial revolution. Electricity came and people were super excited. Industry were built on the back of electricity. And then electronics came. The big mainframe computer that can fit into a room like this became smaller and smaller and smaller. Now you can do computing on your watch. And then we have entered into another space altogether. The space where the physical and the biological are merging. Entering your room, your eyes can open the door for you. Things are shifting rapidly. The jobs of the future, it is documented that 40% of all jobs will disappear in 10 years' time. So the world is shifting. How does Africa keep pace with this shift so that we don't get to a point where everything will be made abroad and sent to us? So when we talk about industrialization, we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution. And within this context, the best way for any nation to innovate and keep pace is through science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education, moving away from memorization of facts and ideas to a point where you are using your mind and hands at the same time. That nexus between TVET and STEM, where it leads to innovation and transformation, is where education is. So you look at the challenges, but you also have to begin to tell yourself, if I don't innovate quickly and I don't leapfrog quickly, then I'm going to be left behind. So when we talk about secondary education, for example, and talk about double track and other strategies, it's leapfrogging. You look at yourself and say, if I don't do things differently, in the next 10 years, 50% of my high school eligible entrants, people who are entering high school, will not be able to go. The question becomes, in Africa with limited resources of infrastructure, how do you ensure the vast majority of the children gets education? So, okay, during vacation, when the school is empty, why don't I push some children through to give me the double track system, to give me the year-round system, so that instead of only educating 830,000 students as it happened in 2016, I can do 1.39 million in 2022.
Okay.
So it's exciting times.
Right.
Very exciting times.
Okay, so now let's talk about some of the challenges.
Yes.
You know, we now have the strike action that's going on. We have the concerns about the textbooks and the learning materials. We have the implementation of the new curriculum rollout. How are you managing all these things to ensure that we have a less bumpy ride this year?
Yeah, I believe that when you begin to look at what is being done, then you can take things in stride. For example, you heard of the national NST, National Standardized Test. For the first time, we tested all primary 4 students. 98% of them tested. And the idea is to see how proficient they are in English and mathematics so that you can plan intervention. We've talked about gifted, we haven't talked about, but we're looking at gifted and talented education, National Education Institute, establishing communities of excellence, innovative ideas. They also have to confront other current challenges. And confronting the current challenges means you need to find the resources to do a number of things. One of the things that is going on now is the textbooks negotiation in terms of pricing and other things. Now we have selected the books. The publishers are going through negotiation with the procurement division of the Ministry of Education. And the next few days, weeks, they will be going to the printers so that printing will be done for all core textbooks from KG1 all the way to primary 6.
Okay.
Then you look at junior high school 1 to 3. Training has been done. I think they completed yesterday or so. And what is going to happen now is that they're distributing the learner packs. Those are learning materials for the first year of the textbook implementation. It's already going to every junior high school. Now, this time around, what we're trying to do and do very well is that during that 1 year, we'll get the textbooks ready for junior high school. That by the time the first year learner packs is completed, their books will be there to replace it. So we learn from the primary school. We don't want that kind of delay, and we are going to be able to produce all the textbooks for junior high schools by the time the first year learner pack content is used. But the good news is that they are now starting distribution, and by the time schools start the junior high school level, moving on, they are going to be able to get the textbook that they need, and training has just been done for the textbooks. In terms of labor issues, of course, you work with human beings, and there will be disagreements as to the way forward. What do we do? Just before Christmas, I got some August visitors in my office, and these were Technical Universities Union. It's called TUTAG. They had come there to give me a citation. Can you believe it? Labor Union of Technical Universities coming to your office, and I was asking my guys, what are they here for? Is there an issue? And they said, no, there's no issue. You mediated and made sure that every demand that we had, the government met it. You followed through. You did everything you could to ensure that the demands were met. And you gave us occasional calls to check on us to make sure everything was done. We are here to give you a citation for the work that you did. It touched me. It was more than a Grammy Award.
Wow.
For me, that two tag will come there and say, you kept faith. What I want to tell my colleagues is the fact that we will keep faith with you. If we promise anything, we'll deliver. Two tag people ask me, why do you think we should trust you? We've seen deception from left and right. And I said, trust me, I'm putting my credibility on the line. We're able to deliver for them. Every union issues that come up, we are willing to work with you. Okay. Give us some room and trust us that even if you were disappointed or deceived, whatever term you want to use,
in the past,
5 years ago, it's a new dawn. The Kufuor era, the focus is on education, and the president himself is willing to ensure that you get your due. So the bottom line for me is that let's go to the table, negotiation table, with a full understanding that this president will not take advantage of you. He rather facilitate your work so that you can deliver for him. Okay,
so with the UTAG, some of the issues are actually still pending in this government because, you know, they went on strike sometime last year. They had some concessions or some conversations around go back and we'll make sure you get what you want.
We promised and we delivered.
Okay,
the
so
research allowance at the time was 1,500 cedis. By the time the whole thing was over, it became $1,600. More than 6 times. So there were no deception as to what the government promised to do. However, there were some other issues that bordered on market survey and other things that need to be done. The survey is out.
So those things are still outstanding.
Yeah, so those are things that we need to sit at the table and judge in order to come to a conclusion that will satisfy
both
everyone.
Parties. Okay. All right, so there's been a lot of changes and innovation in the education sector, and many people are worried about the continuation or the sustainability of it. I mean, in my lifetime, we've gone through middle schools to all sorts of different things. So the issue is how much stakeholder engagement is going on right now to ensure that this doesn't become an NPP-led initiative, but maybe a country-led initiative, so that no matter what government comes into place, these innovative ideas that are being put into place stay and don't get changed.
First of all, I want to tell you a story of what students ask me all the time when I go to their high school. Some of them will ask me, if the NPP is no longer in power, what happened to Free Senior High School? And I will tell them that that is why there's no constitutional requirement that any party that is in power is changed after 8 years. So don't worry about that part. But I'll tell you this. When people ask about this, invariably they haven't heard of the education strategic plan. The current education strategic plan that is being implemented with all these ideas that you are hearing about is from 2018 to 2030.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that.
But
because the one before was 2010 to 2020.
And do you know that when we came into power, that strategic plan had almost been completed by the NDC? There had been a number of stakeholder consultation, and they were on the verge of approving a new education strategic plan. We took it up, didn't throw anything away. We finished the consultations, and we now have a strategic plan from one government to another. So the bottom line is that the strategic plan is the Bible of education transformation in the country. To the extent that you respect that and what is in stakeholder consultation has been done. Now we are at a point where we are reviewing, because every 2 years you look at what you have done and where things have gone right, where things haven't gone right, and we are going through that now. The education strategic plan governs and runs and directs how education should be done in this country. And I always tell people, look at the approaches this government has adopted. Begin to look at what we have changed, and then begin to understand, is it good for the country or not good for the country? Once upon a time, this is what was happening in Ghana. You go to a junior high school in a public setting, and we do the BEC. When the results come out, we tell those students who did not get certain aggregates that too bad, you cannot go to a public senior high school. Your mom should find some money for you to go to a private senior high school. So private senior high schools sprang up across the country to take care of the poor. The ones who need the help the most were the ones who were told that they need to go and pay in a private school. The president introduced free senior high school and he said, I will not leave behind the poor. Therefore, abolish this cutoff. If a student doesn't pass in English and mathematics, he should go and reset and come back. Other than that, no student should be rejected. Then we allow this floodgates to open to bring in all these students. And look at what is happening in the country. The WASI scores are rather going up and not going down. I'll tell you a story. Just came from Bosomtwe. This Friday, I saw off to school 61 students doing engineering and medicine. Last year, I sponsored 30 students to go and do engineering at UMatt. I couldn't have found these students in Bosomtwe to support had it not been the free senior high school. That gave the opportunity of a lifetime. So in terms of government policy, what I tell people all the time is that look at what the government is doing and look at how it is going to transform the fortunes of the country. And they begin to judge. You continue or not continue. But I believe that if you look at what is being done, the innovation that is being brought to the benefit of the Ghanaian, and especially the disadvantaged, there will be a day when people will look at it and say, this is the policy to follow.
Okay, so the plan that you mentioned, the 2010 to 2020 strategic plan, the main drivers were access, quality, and management. Those were the policy drivers that determined the priority interventions. What are the main drivers in this new plan, the 2018 to 2030?
Oh, the 2020, if you look at what we look at the quality, we look at access, we look at the relevance of the education system, and then a serious look at efficiency and effectiveness, whole link up with the management, and then the sustainability, the judicious utilization of human, financial, and other material resources to ensure that we have a balance and continued development in the education system. So it was a continuation of the first one that we are continuing with all the other reforms. So when you look at quality, you look at teacher licensure, for example. You begin to look at how do we improve the quality of the teacher. If you look at the fact that we moved from a 3-year diploma, and actually, in a sense, it was 2 years plus 1 year practicum, to now a full-fledged bachelor's degree program before you teach, either from the KG, primary school, and junior high school. You see there's a sea change in regarding who becomes a teacher and how you prepare them. So in balance, you look at the quality of the teacher. The most important element of the education transformation is the quality of the people in front of the students every day and how you support them. So if you look at what has been done now, where we do professional learning communities, where there's professional development, once every quarter, students don't go to school, teachers go to school and get training. That is something that was not being done in this country. Other countries around the world were doing that. We were not doing that in Ghana. Okay. So things are shifting in that area in terms of quality.
So I just wanted to, when you talked about quality, you know, there's the distribution of teachers in the rural areas and how sometimes problematic that is because some of the more qualified teachers are not necessarily interested in going to the rural areas. When you talk about quality and balance, how are you going to achieve that?
You see, the interesting thing about Ghana, when you go to major conferences around the world, they are surprised to know that Ghana doesn't have a shortage of teachers. Unfortunately, we have them, but we have a serious deployment challenge, which is to say that you have a certain number of teachers, but you go to certain areas and there are abundance of them. You go to another part of the country and there's a shortage. And that is something that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed urgently, because we can't have a situation where students in certain parts of the country don't have teachers. So the unions and GES started dialogue on incentive for rural teachers. It's something that I'm jump-starting. It has to happen. The ministry is going to seriously get involved in it to make sure that we have a policy that rewards those who are willing to stay in the rural areas for a longer period of time, beyond the 3 years that they are required to if they are posted there. So because we have teacher training allowance and there's a bonding situation in place, when we are posting teachers, we can send you to Sabzugu and say you are there minimum of 3 years. But after the 3 years, the person may leave. So what incentive do we create to ensure that people are willing to be posted to rural areas, and when they go there, they are willing to stay there? That is the Rural Teacher Incentive Program, a policy discussion that have taken too long and need to be jump-started so that we can really bring some finality to it and ensure that the teachers who want to go to rural areas know clearly that when you go there, there's some incentive for you. Whether it's a fast-paced promotion regime, whether it's a financial incentive, whatever it is, we need to put it on the table so that you don't have a situation where certain parts of the country don't have enough teachers, others have oversupply of teachers. I think that is something that we have to end.
Take a look at.
We have to end it.
Okay, so let's staying with the word balance, you know, the technical universities, all of them being converted to universities, a lot of complaints about maybe forcing or making all the citizens go through university education when there are other options that ought to be made available. The TVET, how is that coming along? And what ideas and thoughts do you have in that regard? Because now everybody wants to go to university, and there are these really technical manufacturing engineering jobs that can be, you can excel in that if you take another route, not necessarily an education route, but in the technical and vocational area.
The interesting thing is that the technical education, as we knew it, has shifted. You're talking about manufacturing and you're talking about robotics. You are talking about how do you manufacture and create the robots. So things have shifted radically. So the TVET of yesteryears, where it was about sewing and catering and other things, hairdressing, things have shifted dramatically. That in other countries where TVET have transformed their fortunes, they are not looking at how do you do hairdressing, but they are looking at how do you manufacture a better hairdressing equipment. So you really have to begin to look at how do you attract your best and brightest into TVET so that it doesn't become the space where if you don't do academically, then you venture there. So that combination is a critical one. And I think what will help us a lot is when we begin to look at the curricula in the TVET space. If a student comes there and cannot read and write, don't take it for granted that in their field it's not needed. If you want them to be entrepreneur, they need to be able to put together a business plan. So if they come in and they can't read, they can't write, it's incumbent upon us in the TVET space to do intervention for them. For students to understand that you come to this space to innovate. And innovating means you really have to be able to read and write and do some arithmetic. So the bottom line is this. TVET space should not be a space where we ask students who don't do well in the academic space. What it means is that we should strive to ensure that every student do well by the time they complete junior high school. And if they choose to go to TVET, they go there with critical skills of reading and writing and doing arithmetic so that they can truly explore TVET to the highest level possible. But having said that, the TVET space is important. As I speak with you, we have plans to even build technical colleges, almost like the old polytechnics, because we've come to realize that it's so critical. We don't have to look at technical universities where we are producing just engineers, and we don't have the technician to complement the work of the engineer. So the new space in the TVET space that is being created, if you look at high schools and the equipment that are in high school level TVET space, you'll be amazed. Sometimes you may think that you are in a technical university in terms of the equipment that are coming. However, we also have to have a clear understanding that in this country, our secondary space has become a space where you transition to tertiary. And unless we begin to emphasize industry certification in such a way that if you do ICT, you do computer engineering in high school, you can repair computers. And it's an area with jobs coming. Computer networking, so that you can build networks. You don't have to finish university to do that. So we need to also shift the TVET space into the IT field, into the high-tech field, where there is demand. So that if a company wants to hire a network engineer, it can be a high school graduate.
Yeah.
So it's a very exciting space, but a lot needs to be done so that it doesn't become a pass-through to tertiary, but it becomes a place where you stop, acquire the skills, and get a job after high school. Most companies would rather hire a high school graduate who can do networking than a university graduate who probably has learned it from the books.
Yeah, there's a program that the UK has. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name. Where it speaks to what you're saying, meaning that in high school, when they get to the last 3 years, they have a choice of going the vocational route, or they have a choice of going through the route that would take them to the tertiary education. And so at that point, they also are affiliated with a company.
Yes.
And they are able to go there and actually hone their skills. And hopefully those companies are the ones that employ them when they graduate. So as we talk about, you know, modifying, upgrading, innovating our TVET space, some of these ideas, like you were saying, could hopefully help us to energize the area and get people into that area and not see that as a second-class option, but really as a first choice. You know, we're having a lot of questions coming in, so I want to ask you maybe one final question and then just go to the questions that are coming in. You know, education. I mean, a lot of people find that as when I say I want to give my child a better life, it almost starts with me giving them a better education. I wanted to just talk about the Decade for Education for Sustainable Development. And they have reiterated the vital role that education plays actually in achieving the Millennium Development Goals. And they talk about these roles include eradication of extreme poverty and hunger, redressing social inequities, and dealing with other sustainable issues such as health and environment. So in the push that we currently have in terms of making sure that we are providing primary education to everyone, are we measuring pre-SHS and post-SHS to see how some of these interventions are actually showing a progression in the right direction?
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, as a nation, we were not measuring. The last measure that people talk about 2015, when they selected a group of primary 2 students and they assessed them in English, and it turned out that only 2% passed. So until we did the NST, the National Standardized Test, this past December, for many years there has not been any attempt of assessing for us to even know whether what we are working on is working or not. So next academic year, which begins on the 18th, we're going to have primary 2 assessment in literacy and arithmetic, primary 4 and primary 6. This is the first bold attempt at understanding what is actually going on in the classroom across the country. And the beauty of this is that it's going to help us to begin to see how well we're doing, and if we are not doing well, what intervention do we have to provide so that the students will do well. So when we assess students in primary 2, primary 3 is your intervention year. And also one critical aspect is that we somehow, in the public space, parents invariably think that when they send their children to their teachers, the work begins and ends with the teacher. The parent participation in the rural community, which used to be a big deal many years ago, has become a thing of the past. And now we are creating what we call communities of excellence, communities where parents, the chief, market women, pastors, everybody will come together and say, how is our school doing? How do we even get a report from the head teacher, how well the school is doing? Because you can't talk about eliminating poverty if children from deprived community don't have quality education. So eliminating poverty means you have to do projects and programs that allows the poor to be lifted up. And that is why I'm excited about what happened with Free Senior High School when the government directed that there should be some kind of affirmative action which reserved 30% of spaces in the top senior high schools in the country for those who went to public school. So today when you go to Wesley Girls, it's not just for the rich and the famous.
Well, it
The
wasn't.
village kids are also there.
It wasn't for the rich and famous.
Hey, no, recently it was because you see what happens was that I'm sure you probably went there.
Wesley Girls. I went to a Brick Girls, but it was really
all in the same league.
No, we were really based on GPA.
Do you know that until Free Senior High School, in most of those schools, about 90% were from private school.
Yes, but we all now also have the issue of overcrowding in some of those places because there are a lot. I mean, for a Brick Girls, for example, the hall, the dining hall, has now been converted into a dormitory. So there are certain.
The thing is this, and yet a Brick Girls is excelling.
Of course, we are excellent.
Yeah, you are excellent. Yeah. You can't take that away from you. So when you talk about, I have too many students, but I'm excelling. So that means a Brick Girls have a culture of learning second to none.
Exactly.
So it doesn't really matter who you give to a Brick Girls. Whether they can read or can't write, a Brick Girls transform that student and they become so great at what they do. You go to a school like Wesley Girls, you bring them students from backgrounds where sometimes it's difficult for them to read or speak English. By the time they leave, somehow Wesley Girls has a way of transforming them. You have a culture of learning second to none. So you are the ones who should get students from the private communities. But it wasn't happening until recently.
All right. So let's talk, before we go into the questions, let's talk about the academic calendar.
Yes.
Because there are some questions coming in about the fact that it's now a semester basis, and what informed that, and how is that, what impact is that going to have?
They really wanted to do alignment in terms of junior high, primary school, high school, but they did something very unique, that the first half of the semester has a break, right, in between. So there's a break between the first half and the second half, so people get rest. But the good news is that it aligns with all the levels of the education system. Last year, they did the junior high school. And then the complaints that parents were coming up was that when their kids from the primary school are on recess or vacation, the junior high schools are in school. So for parents working homes, the major problem they had was that they had to make different arrangements through the entire year. And if they wanted to have a break, a vacation or something, it wasn't possible. Because this group will be in school, the younger ones will be at home, and it was having a major challenge on them. So I think this was in response to what the parents brought up. And also, initially, most teachers thought it was too long, and that is why Ghana Education says, okay, this is what we need to do. Let's put a break in between the first part and the second part in such a way that you don't go the full semester, but you have a break in between. Okay,
so I'm going to go into the questions now. Hello, good evening. Please kindly tell the Honorable Minister that I commend him for the good works he's doing at the education sector, but we, the graduates, are pleading with him to fast-track our clearance so that we can also be recruited just like the college graduates. My concern has to do with the proposed timetable. If a school decides to begin class at 7 a.m. and closes at 3:30 p.m., that's 8 hours and 30 minutes. In a week, that school is doing 42 hours and 30 minutes, far more than the 33 hours and 20 minutes suggested on the timetable. Even less, 60 minutes break should bring us to 37 hours and 30 minutes. And then they talk about co-curricular activities like compound cleaning are not factored in the calculation. And then they actually probably asked a little bit of what informed the above decisions and what initiatives is the ministry undertaking to motivate the Ghanaian teacher as far as negotiations for better conditions of service. So that's it. And let me just ask one more. He spoke on UTAG and 2TAG issues, but failed to highlight on CTAG issues. I would like to hear him on the CTAG matters. So maybe I'll have you take these three, and then we can...
I think CTAG is also an issue before the NLC, and they've been asked to come to the employers and talk as to how to move forward. We are arranging meetings with all the groups, and I'm the advocate for teachers. The Minister for Education wants the best for his employees. So I do everything possible to make sure they get the best. But I also understand there's a strong national purse with this COVID. So in as much as I want the best for them and everything they ask for, I want to give it to them, I also have to be mindful that there are some constraints. But within those constraints, we do our very best to ensure that their needs are met. So CTAG members should understand that I know there was a first meeting. We are going to consult further and meet with them to make sure what I did with 2TAG, I will be able to do something for them.
Okay.
So I'm here for them.
Okay. Good evening. This is Amini from Jinlu. I suggest that SHS students who are still in school should be given at least 3 weeks to also prepare themselves to join their colleagues later. This is Eric from Koforidua. Please ask the minister about the second cycle teachers intervention.
Intervention has been released, so he should be sitting tight.
Okay. It's
coming. We released 60 million cedis for intervention. So
great.
It's going to them very soon, so he shouldn't worry at all.
Okay. This is an interesting one. I've been posted to an island for over 6 years now. Not even promotion, which is due me, is given me. Not talking of study leave. It takes me crossing 2 rivers before I get to Ketekrachi to assess my monthly salary. What does the minister think?
I salute you, Ketekrachi teacher. I salute you for your sacrifice, tremendous sacrifice that you are making. And I'll get your contacts from the producer, and I'll get in touch with you. But I salute you for the work that you are doing for Mother Ghana. People like you ought to be celebrated. You are the unsung heroes of our time. Thank you for your service to Ghana.
This is from William Intema. Let the citizens of this country upgrade your performance and not yourself. Our education system is in a mess. May Allah help us. And then
education system in a mess. I think Ghanaians will know that we may have challenges, but education system is not in a mess. So that is his opinion. Of course, I can't take his opinion away from him.
Yes. And then this is, thank you very much for such a wonderful discussion with the minister. Please ask the minister for me, when are they going to recruit people who did distance education and have completed their national service and also passed the license examinations?
Distance education, irrespective of how you got there and got your license, the Ghana Education Service recruits based on openings that are there and also based on financial clearance. If there are openings and they secure financial clearance, they will recruit, irrespective of how you became a teacher, whether you did the brick and mortar or you did the distance. So sit tight. When the opportunity comes, they will be recruiting. I think at this time, they are doing the placement of those who went to colleges of education. And after that, when the opportunity comes, they have spaces left and clearance available, they recruit distance and they recruit everyone who is in the market.
Okay, so I'm going to read about 5 more questions and then please, Honorable Dr. Edutrum is hardworking and very innovative. However, they should try and eliminate the double track system because the assistant heads are suffering. There is no leave for them and no allowance for them. We talked about the CSAC already. Let me just go back here.
Double track. If I want, I may address that.
Sure.
We are in a transition now from double track to single track. You know, when we started the double track system, what happened was that Form 1s were divided into 2, Form 2s were divided into 2. It's no longer the case this year. This academic year, Form 1s will go together as one cohort. Form 2s will go together as one cohort.
Okay. Form
3s have always been going together as a cohort. So this is a transition time from double track to single track, a situation where all Form 1s, when school open, if they happen to be twins, one will not be on another track, another on the other track. They are all going to go to school as a cohort. But we are not in a single track phase yet. We get to single track when more buildings are completed and the entire school reports the same day. But majority of the schools in Ghana are actually single track.
Okay.
About 333 thereabouts are double track. The rest are all single track. They open the same day and close the same day across the country.
Okay.
But a few double track schools are also transitioning.
Okay, so please ask the minister when the posting of trained teachers will be released since basic schools resume on the 18th.
I was assured that any moment from then the list will come out.
Okay.
Yeah, because they were in a kind of a conclave, doing everything and doing the postings, and I'm assured that within next week, any moment, within the week, that the posting will happen.
Okay, so there's another one on how is the free SHS funded and is the free boarding school a drain on the public purse?
Free boarding school, not a drain on a public purse. From now, you see the benefits. I just talk about Bosumtwi. How can a district like Bosumtwi get 60 students do engineering and medicine had it not been for double track? And how many schools, how many communities have access to day schools? So if there's no school in your community, boarding is a necessity. And for that matter, I wouldn't say boarding schools are a drain. Of course, it costs us more to do boarding school compared to day. But if you look at the human capital that we need to build in this country, it's not a drain. It's something that is a bitter pill to swallow now. Know that 10, 20 years from now, those individuals that got the opportunities of a lifetime to get free education at the secondary level are the very ones who are going to pay taxes to build this country. So, yes, we need to do everything possible to ensure that this opportunity is given and students take advantage of it and then move up fast enough to the tertiary and to other skills training so that this country will benefit from their expertise.
Please, my minister, Dr. Chum, talked about helping the poor to go to school. Please ask him for me, what is his ministry doing about student loan payment, which delays all the time, whereby the poor students who needed to pay their fees can't get it early to pay the fees on time and register for their course before the new academic year and semester begins?
Yeah, we are doing something about it. The president directed that we do the no guarantor policy. As I speak with you, it was in Parliament. Before this brouhaha came, we wanted it approved so that it can be used for implementation for those students from deprived communities where they don't have people with pensions to guarantee for them. So as soon as we return to Parliament, I'm hopeful that Parliament will pick it up, get the no guarantor policy approved as desired by the President, and let's move forward with it so that the deprived and the disadvantaged will get opportunity to borrow without being asked to produce somebody who has pension to guarantee. So that would be a game changer in terms of access to resources for tertiary education. So praying and hoping Parliament comes back, it will come up quickly as we attempted before we shut down. We adjourned so that the deprived and those who don't have people who are pensioners and people who have social security can also have access to the loans.
Okay, so let's talk philosophically for a moment. You know, education as a concept is no longer, like you were saying earlier, you called it memorization. We call it chew and pull way back when, or even focusing on a passing grade. It's now about, you know, enriching oneself, about bettering oneself. And, you know, there are buzzwords in education now, like education for life, compassion-driven research, multidisciplinary, global impact. So when you look at your strategic plan 2018 to we have this education that takes, you know, some of our students don't see it that way. They look at it more as a means to an end rather than a means of self-improvement and all these other things that can affect each aspect of our lives.
You see, our students are rational just like us, the professors and the teachers. They look for what you want and they give it to you. If the student knows that the best way for them to get good grades in school is to memorize, they will memorize for you. So when you look at the 4 C's, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, if all these are reflected in the assessment and in the curriculum, you're going to have students move towards this direction. On the other hand, if the exams lend itself to memorization, as you said, chew, pour, pass, and forget, they're going to do that. They are rational human beings. You give the teacher what the teacher wants so that you will succeed. On the other hand, if you have a situation where the assessment is such that if you memorize, you will not be able to pass it, then you're going to see students looking at it and say, I better think critically. The professor is looking for my ideas, not his ideas. So all these things are great, but we need to have an education system that assesses distance. Otherwise, the chew, pour, pass, and forget will continue. And sometimes say you chew, pour, pass, sometimes you don't pass and you are forgotten. So what we need to do, and that's what the new curriculum speaks to. The new curriculum speaks to the fact that the era where everything is memorized should not obtain any longer, and that we should have an education system where people are being more creative. So I always talk about the fact that instead of asking a student what is pollution and the effects of pollution, if you begin to ask them, how do you create a city without pollution? And they come together in groups, and they are thinking about, okay, solar energy, this and that, electronic cars. All of a sudden, the students are becoming more creative, and those are the people that the 21st century society needs. But invariably, students walk into my office, oh, I need a job. I say, okay, you need a job, let's talk. When you look at the body language, begin to look at answers to your questions. If you're a private company, you may probably not hire the person, because you see that the person is not going to add value to your company. Companies are looking for young men and women with great talent and critical thinking skills who will go home, think about the company, and bring up innovation that will earn them millions. Those are the people companies around the world are looking for. So if we don't change our education system, and it's all about memorization, companies are not looking for people who can memorize for them. Computers do memorization, not human beings. So we have come to a time when our education system has to look at the 4 C's and has to begin to build the person inside out, so that he's somebody that he's proud of and he has his own set of ideas, and in a respectful way he can articulate his ideas to you. But how do we do this when the classroom does not lend itself to that? A student goes to class and he's told that you take what I tell you, write it down, memorize for me, you pass the exam. So the kid's own ideas is somehow bottled up and he can't express it. And God forbid he expresses it, out of 10 he's whipped. And we know that education psychology tells us that a child who is afraid cannot think. I've visited schools upon schools across the length and breadth of this country, and in most of them, after I talk to a class, I ask them what questions you have for me, nobody will raise up their hand. Their creativity has been bottled up. And unless we create a classroom environment where they are free to express their ideas in the usual respectful Ghanaian way, we are not going to be able to create a school system that then produce the kind of critical thinking we need to change our country.
Well, hopefully the new curriculum addresses some of this.
Yes.
But what about local languages? A long time ago, I remember a French faculty member who was talking about the difficulty of the students in learning French. And he actually said that, in his opinion, students have to translate it into their local language and then in English before they can even translate it into French.
Yes.
So some people, the barriers for them is the language, like you were saying. Some people want to go to the TVET, but they have the barrier of English. What, you know, the eastern part of Africa has Swahili, you know, and other countries like India are actually thinking about using some of the local languages in the educational system. Do we have any such plans? Or
you know, Singapore didn't use any of their local languages, and they are the best in the world.
Yeah, but
so the thing invariably is not so much about the local language. When you talk about doing well academically is not about the local language. However, you can make a case, transmission of culture, that if the children lose their language, they are losing some aspect of their culture. So that is why it's important for us to ensure that they can learn their language. But maybe not learn through their language, because if you come to Accra, which language are you using? Accra, Ghana. What do you do? Some people say, oh, they've done a survey, and in some places in Accra, the predominant language is Twi, right? But what about the 10 students in there who don't understand Twi?
Yeah, maybe the word I should have used was regional language, because when I talked about Swahili, I was talking about
it's not a response to even that. I'm telling you what the argument that has been going on. And the interesting thing is that I sit in my office and people come and they make this argument, right? And then you ask them, what school does your child attend? And so my child go to junior. I said, do they teach them using the local language? I said, no, they don't do that there. My child is doing so well. My child is an excellent. Oh, GI is the best school. I said, but they are not using tree. So we should be able to separate the two issues. We have to be concerned about the fact that a Ghanaian child doesn't speak any Ghanaian language.
Well, I think the word is access. I mean, access is part of
the content.
Exactly.
Okay, now
yes.
the content issue. The content issue. One of the issues we've had in this country is the fact that we teach English to our children as if they are native speakers. There's a whole strategy for teaching English as a second language, as you know, is done in UK.
Exactly.
The Indians and other people who come there, they have a strategy that enables them to grasp the English in a shorter period of time. They don't teach them as if they are native speakers of English. But our English language curriculum has been designed in such a way that all Ghanaian children are being taught as if English is their first language. So there's a need for that shift, and attempts have now begun to look at English as a second language and the strategies that are used by people like Krishna who have studied this and talk about language acquisition and language learning. Acquisition of language is when you get a child immersed in it, and before you know they are speaking English. Then you go to learning where you improve their grammar. But invariably, we've combined this. And I tell people all the time, when your child is young and they are home and you're speaking to them, do you start teaching them A, B, C, D before they speak the language that you're speaking to them? No, you don't. They acquire the language without knowing the elements of grammar. But as they grow up and go to school, then they do the grammar. So what we have to do is to have a language policy that really speaks to the issues and concerns that you are bringing up. We have not had a coherent one. There has been situations where USAID came in, supported the second use of the second first language, and there was a whole lot of debate around it. And we need to really begin to look at the fact that language learning is important for maintenance of our culture, by getting access to the content so that they can participate is very essential, and it doesn't have to be through our language. It can be through English. However, if that is what we have determined to do, then we have to make sure that we teach English differently so that we don't have situations where the children are falling behind, and because they can't read, they are not accessing content. And it's a big deal in high schools, where you go in and teachers will tell you that these children can't read. So they can't access the content. And the sad thing is that even though we know they can't read, we still give them 10 subjects to do. We are calling for a common sense reform in that area that says if the student can't read, let's give them additional reading subjects and allow the student to do 9 subjects instead of 10. And consequently, by the time they get to Form 2, they may revert to the 10 because by that time, they will have mastered the English language. So different things ought to be done in that space so that English doesn't become a barrier. But if I were teaching mathematics and I speak Tree and the child speaks Tree, it won't make sense if I use Tree to help him and he will understand the content faster. So you can see where you can use Tree for differentiation and for what we call in education scaffolding, to lift that child up from point A to B, because the moment it comes in, they understand. But if you talk about using Tree to teach mathematics, as some people advocated for primary 1 to 4, you know that when they get to primary 4, you can't teach fraction because we don't have enough vocabulary to teach fractions.
Okay, so there's a few things running around on social media about a summary of new education reforms outline. I don't know if it's exactly from your ministry, but there's something in there that talks about all students in JHS 1 to SHS 1 shall run a common core program called CPP, which comprises of 9 subjects, namely math, languages, science, physical education, career technology, social science, computing, and creative art and design. I was wondering if you could comment on this specific one.
It was a proposal that has been discontinued. Because around the world, lower secondary, upper secondary, if there's a continuum, that is fine. But lower secondary does not have to go up to first year of upper secondary. We thought that was bringing about too much confusion. So Cabinet directed that we should focus the Common Core from junior high school 1 to 3.
Okay.
So now the senior high school curriculum is in development. And we are bringing universities, industry, everybody around the table so that we can develop the last 3 years of our curriculum for secondary. So the junior high school curriculum is going to be, which is called Common Core, is going to be 3 years. And the senior high school curriculum is also going to be 3 years. So it's no longer 4-year junior high school curriculum, finding space in the high school and all the confusion that is what's bringing.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask you about Africa Education Watch. And I'm just going to go back to the issue they had with the textbooks. Only because as you implement new programs, I wanted to ask you what you thought about this statement that they made. They said that the current imbalance and agitations within the education sector could have been avoided if the government completely ensured the accessibility of the learning materials before the rollout. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I don't know what they are watching, but if they are watching me, I want them to know that we are at the tail end of the process of bringing our textbooks. And I've also said it here, that junior high schools will not go through a similar situation because they have 1 year learning materials there, and then by the end of the 1 year, the junior high school curriculum will be available. So we'll avoid a situation where it takes 2 years to get textbooks into the classroom.
Okay. So we are getting to the end. So do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make
closing
before
remarks.
we wrap up?
I heard that this was the first live.
It is. It is. For this year. For this year. For 2022.
Oh,
this is actually the first show we are running.
So I'm part of your history then.
You are for 2022.
I'm super excited that I was the first to do the live show on Talking Point. When we were kids, Talking Point was a big deal. I never thought I'd grow up to be on Talking Point. But today I'm here.
Yes, you are.
And what I will say is I'm very grateful to you for helping the audience understand what the president is doing in the education space. But I'll tell you one thing. I'm one of the luckiest education ministers, I say, in the world. Why? I taught in high school. I became a school administrator. I developed schools. I became a deputy minister. And now I'm the substantive minister. Thank God and Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. And within this contest, I've learned a lot. I know a lot. I'm not bragging that, but I'll tell you, I know how education systems transform countries. In my PhD program, I studied comparative education. Look at education systems around the world. We are in a good place. Based on the vision of the president. Yes, there will be challenges, no doubt. But I want people to understand that the president's vision of where he wants to take education is where we need to go. And Ghana will benefit from the leadership of Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo in the education sector. Okay. On that note, I want to thank all of you for joining us on tonight's Talking Points, and a very, very special thank you to my guest, the Honorable Minister of Education, Dr. Yao Osei Edichum. I'm Dr. Anim Rice, and this has been Talking Point. Thank you so much for listening and watching. As always, good night, good luck, and please be and stay safe. Till next week.